All right, let's talk about the type tool. So I'm going to start by just making a new document, File, and New. And I'm going to choose just a typical letter, which would be an 8.5 by 11. Now remember, if you wanted to change the orientation from portrait to landscape, you can do so right here. And I'm going to click OK. So here I have just a regular 8.5 by 11 page. I'm going to zoom in using my quick keys, Control and Spacebar, to zoom in, and then just my hand to reorganize, replace this. So remember that once we are in our type tool, using that spacebar will not be an option because it will add spaces to my text. So I'm over here. This is my type tool. Remember, the type tool has some hidden tools. We have an area type tool, type on a path. Then we have some vertical type options, which aesthetically not the best choice. Basically what those will do is stack the letters on top of one another. And then a new tool for Illustrator CC called the Touch Type tool. So back up to the type tool, let's just look at sort of the anatomy of what we get when we type. So I have my cursor ready to go. What I need to do is click on the artboard, and when I click, my control bar up here at the top, or my options bar, will change to deal with just typography. I get a flashing insertion point right here, and I'm ready to type. So if I type some text, you can see my text is visible, and this is at 12 points, so it seems maybe a little bit small. Let's go and look at how we can adjust some of these things. Like I said, there are some options up here, but what I'm going to go and look at are the actual character and paragraph panel. I can click the shortcut or a little link here. I tend to not like this because I like my panels to float, specifically the character and the paragraph, because I like to look at them and make changes, have them be visible. So I'm going to go under Window. And Window starts, Window has a lot of things in it. So you can see this is what it looks like at the top. And actually, if I look for character, I don't see it here. That is because they group the character and the paragraph along with character styles and paragraph styles, things we'll look at more in the future, all together here. So I'm going to click character. When I do that, actually what pops up together is paragraph, and actually open type will open with this group as well. So if you're not seeing everything, double click on the character tab of this panel and it will extend. I'm going to have it so all areas are visible here. So to begin with, I can see that I have my specific font selected. Now if I change this, I do get a sample of what my font is going to look like, and this will depend on what you have installed on your system. So if I choose, say, Arial, it didn't change it. My text was not selected or highlighted. So I need to highlight that text and then go and change it back to Arial. And now it has converted to Arial. And I can double check up here at the top. It says Arial as well. I'm going to increase my font size. Right now it's at 12 point. Remember, 72 points is equal to an inch. That makes it a little bit more visible, which probably this will work fine for what we are doing. Now, what text rests on is called a baseline. Those that have had typography maybe remember some of these terms. So I'm going to navigate back to my selection tool. So you can see this as an option. So this path, this blue line that my text is resting on, is the baseline. And I can do alterations to that baseline. Now, I also can use some of these other features in here. Let's just run through them and explain what they are. So, of course, we talked about font, and we have our font style, whether it be bold. This is a narrow bold. Here's a straight up bold. So I can choose my style. Now, every font is going to have different style options. It depends on what comes with the font. Here's my font size. So I do have a drop-down menu where I can change just by selecting. I can also use my up and down arrow here to increase it, or if I know exactly what I want, I can type in my exact measurement and just press my tab key to apply that. My text will always be measured in points. Remember, 72 points is 1 inch. So I also have the leading. It's not leading, it's leading. And leading is the space between baselines. I would see that if I navigate back to my type tool, and I'm going to press actually enter to make a hard return. Another enter for a hard return. So if I have this selected now again, you have to be careful. You can see where I'm clicking with my cursor to make my flashing insert point. Some of these features will work and some of them won't. So you can see if I click in here right now, nothing's happening. I need to select my text to see what's going to happen here. So the leading automatically is 20% more than my size of my font. So it's a 20% increase, and you can see easily here with 100 point, I have 120 leading. Leading comes from the old terminology of the printing world when they actually had those little letters that they would line up, and then they would put extra chunks of lead in between those lines of text to indicate how much room between lines. So that term has stuck, and we still call it leading, even though we're not dealing with any lead, but it's dealing with the space between. And now you can see as I'm decreasing this, it's starting to crunch together. And what happens is if I go below my point size of my text, I'm going to start creating on the other line's space. So I'll start entering into the descender, the ascender area. And here you can see that I'm touching. Now this is going to be dependent on the type of font you have chosen. Okay, so that's what the leading is. Next up I have the kerning. Okay, so kerning is the space between two characters. And typically you would only kern in larger display type or text or headlines. Rule of thumb typically is, if it's going to be between 24 or higher, I guess, then you would start looking at kerning. And kerning is a pure visual. And so if you look at MMDT here, I don't have any terrible things happening, but you can see between the D and the T, maybe a little bit more white space there than what seams should be. So I'm going to put my cursor there. And because I'm at such a large size, it's going to take quite a bit. So I can use these big chunks here to go down. Now I have to tell you that a lot of these things are measured off of an M. So the EM is what it's called, and M is a portion of a point. So if we talk about, we're going to be doing these in like 1/1000th of an M. So that's why if I just move it a tiny bit, you're not seeing anything, especially at this large point. Every once in a while the screen will refresh and it'll look like it jumps over if you look really closely there. So the M is equal to 1 point font. So if you could think of this, kind of that relationship there. Now again, it's all visual, and so I'm going to just kind of get this a little bit in, and then I'm going to change my cursor to a different point temporary here because it's kind of a distraction, and my screen's having a hard time redrawing. I'm just going to go up and down quick with my scroll and my mouse, and it disappears. So there you can see that the D and the T a little bit closer together. Just feels a little bit better at that larger point size. Now where kerning is between two letters, the next one we have here, tracking, is for a series of letters. So it would be between specific characters that I select or an entire block of text. So if I do the tracking here, it'd be like I was kerning between all of those letters, and you can see they're all getting scrunched together. Now a plus sign, or if I go to the more of the positive, it's going to increase the space. Negative decreases it. So if I do a dramatic amount, like an increase of 100, you can see spread apart. A decrease, negative 100, scrunched together. All right, so that's the tracking and the kerning. So kerning between two characters, tracking is for selected characters, and I'm using my type tool to select those characters. Below we have some scaling options. And if you were, dealing with a really traditional graphic designer, they would say, don't ever vertically scale. See how I'm stretching it? Set this back to 100%, which is our sort of default. Or if I stretch it vertically, okay? Now, if you were to be doing this on a classic font, some graphic designers would just totally cringe. We always joke that Arial is something you can always mess around with this. There's no quality behind Arial, but if it was Helvetica, then we would have another topic here to talk about. So it's all under the, what you feel you want your design to and your typography to look like, but be careful. The other thing with all of these items in the character panel is that they are sticky, meaning if I leave this vertical scale that maybe I choose on the two M's here, if I leave that at 150 and I save my document, close it, open it up, Illustrator tomorrow, it's going to remember some of these options. And so always be aware and take a quick look here that you reset it. I believe there's a reset panel right here as well. So you can do that before you're done and close up shop for the night so that you don't forget and mistakenly wonder what in the world is happening. All right. We have baseline shift here as well. So remember, when I went to my selection tool, I clicked, you saw that my text was resting on a baseline. Now the baseline shift will allow me to go back to my type tool. I'm going to select my D and my T here. Baseline shift allows me to shift my text from the baseline. Actually, it's going to take that baseline and move it. So if I go to a positive number, see how my baseline, I'm just going to keep my mouse down here. Positive number increases it. A negative number, and again, I can do a big chunk at a time, but there you go. Now I'm below, 12 points below my baseline. So that's the baseline shift. The rotations, all I can say there is just stay away from it because it does some really bad things. There's a new tool in Illustrator that fixes kind of the issue that we've had with that. Below, then we have some different extras here. The strike through the underline, subscript, superscript, small caps, and all caps. So if there's a need for that. All right, let's take a look at the paragraph panel real quick here. So the paragraph panel, again, it might be collapsed or you don't see all of the options. We have our alignments here, so I can choose to have different alignments like centered. Now, because I did a hard return here, it thinks that each one of these lines is its own paragraph, so it's going to struggle with this a bit. But you understand what left aligned, centered, right aligned. The justifications, be careful with. There are set applications in which they work. Most times they don't work very well at all. So be careful with those. We also have our indents, left line indent, right line indent, first line. We have a space before paragraph, space after. So things that you would see in typical word processing programs. Also at the bottom we have our hyphenate. So hyphenations, again, something that people have different opinions on. So I can choose right here to hyphenate or not to hyphenate. My personal opinion is not to hyphenate. Hyphenations are bad. They're evil. You don't want to have them. But this is just one place that you can change that. You also can go under your edit menu and go down to preferences. And in preferences, it's such an important topic, that I need to have my own option, hyphenation. So it depends. You can put some exceptions in here. So if you do have hyphenation on, what words will you not hyphenate? Say Ridgewater. I do not want that hyphenated. I would type in Ridgewater here, and add it, and that's my exception. It goes off of a default language dictionary, so I'm using English USA. If you're working with a different language, then you may be looking in here for other dictionaries. Okay, so that's where I can put in an exception. You also, back to the paragraph panel, under my little drop-down options button, I do have a hyphenation option here where it will open up the dialog box. And so if I choose to hyphenate it, words, longer than 6 letters can be hyphenated after the first 2, before the last 2, so you can put your set specifications here. As a designer, I was always taught hyphenations are evil. Absolutely, under no circumstances can you have more than 3 in an entire, like if you had a story in a magazine, no more than 3 ever. And I always say, if I see them, let's try to play with the features a bit and get rid of them. There are tricks that we can do. All right. So I'm going to just cancel that. A couple of other things just to note. Back under Window and Type, it remembered that my window panel was at the bottom, so I'm there again. The glyphs. So a glyph is basically a special character that we don't typically see on our keyboard. So this is where if you're trying to find, say, the trademark symbol or a registered symbol, you can certainly be looking through here and find some of those symbols or special characters that we don't typically see. So you might have to hunt a little bit, but say here's the copyright, registered, trademarked, those types of symbols. Okay, so that's under glyphs. And it's just a panel, so if I really wanted to, I could just, group it with my paragraph. It's a little bit larger, but group it with paragraph and character so that it's up if I desire to have that. One thing that we can do as we're working on our artwork in Illustrator, our illustrations, we can choose to hide certain things. If I go under Object, there's a Hide, and I can hide either my selection, all the artwork above what I'm doing, or all are on other layers, the other layers, hide them. So if I hide the selection, this happened to be all grouped. It was one text object, and so now it's all hiding. This is good if you've got multiple things going on and you don't want to mistakenly select something and move it or change it by accident. If things are hiding, they will not print. So what prints is what you see. If I choose Object and Show All, everything is back. So same thing for some of you that are familiar with layers. I'm going to open my Layers panel. It would be the same thing as turning the eyeball on or turning the eyeball off. Same thing. Last piece of information in this section. So there may be times, and we will learn here down the road, that I have to have my text become outlines. What that means is that my text will no longer be editable text where I can change the words, I can change the spelling, I can change, the font, all of that. I may have to have it be outlined. And that would be going into the type menu. Now, it is grayed out when I have my text selected with a type tool. So I need to go and select this with the selection tool and go back under type and create outlines. And I'll run it. And what will happen, now my text are all objects. Initially, it starts out as being grouped. They're all grouped together. So I'm going to go to Object and Ungroup, deselect. And so now you can see that each letter is its own object. And this opens a lot of flexibility for customizing, altering, just rearranging things on how you want them. All right. So this was about the basically character panel, the paragraph panel, the character panel, and just dealing with the general type tool.